Enough to join a number of 20 or so legal networks around the world. In the state, we would end up
各位来宾大家好，那我们709律师节10周年的活动即将在5分钟之后正式开始，请大家开始陆续入座。那这边有几件事情要大家注意。第一件事情，现场我们会有直播，那我们的直播镜头只会对着台上的讲者，所以不会拍摄到参与者。那也请大家如果在拍摄照片或影片的时候，请不要拍摄到参与者，请不要拍摄到参与者，但是仅可以拍摄讲者。第二件事情，因为我们是直播的话，我们现场所有的声音都会收进我们的直播画面跟直播镜头里面，所以要请大家注意谈话的音量。那第三件事情，那希望大家在会议开始之后呢，不要再随意走动。那正中间走道有看到摄影机，请大家如果要去使用洗手间或是取用食物的话，请不要走中间走道，请不要走中间走道请从左右两边走到行进到后面，以免挡住我们的摄影机。那如果有任何的问题，可以再来这边洽询我们的工作人员，谢谢。
谢谢你。对对对对。Yeah. Okay. Nice to meet you. Let's meet you. Look forward to your speech.
Yeah,
right. It's very good. We translated it into Chinese, so we'll show the translation.
还动不了啊？我还能动了。好哎。哦，我知道，我现在没调，就是
把这个丢掉，那我就丢进去就好了。请大家坐下吧，我们已经不到2分钟就要开始了，请大家入座，安静，我们不到2分钟就要开始了。We will begin in less than 2 minutes. Please be seated and please stay quiet because all the voices will be sucked in and broadcast.
好
这个可不可以往后稍微挪一下？ 放这边，不需要那么近，不需要那么近，有扩音器，不需要那么近。OK， 好的 ，OK。Friends and colleagues, good evening, good morning, and good day. On behalf of the 8 civil society groups from the United States, Japan, and Taiwan, and Europe, as well as the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, and the Council of Bars and the Law Societies of Europe, welcome to join us here at the University of Tokyo, all virtually from around the world, to mark the 10th anniversary of the 709 crackdown on human rights lawyers in China, and the 9th China Human Rights Lawyers' Day. Welcome. We began on this day, what began on this day 10 years ago has only grown in significance, as it is a manifestation of some of the most fundamental issues facing China and the world. Today with us to discuss these issues are the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers, Ms. Margaret Satterthwaite, leaders of international bar associations, academics, and the prominent Chinese human rights lawyers. Together, we renew our support for the human rights lawyers and the rights defenders in China, celebrate their work and their courage, and keep alive the hope that truth and justice will eventually prevail. We have a rich program ahead. Without further ado, let's begin. First, Baroness Helena Kennedy, the director of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, will address the assembly with her opening remarks.
Thank you so much. To be with us on this important meeting. Today we are, as you've just heard, marking this 10th anniversary of the most reprehensible attack on human rights lawyers and human rights defenders in China, and the draconian effects of those events continue to this day. On July the 9th, 2015, the Chinese government launched a nationwide offensive targeting hundreds of human rights defenders. The aim was not to uphold the rule of law, as the regime claimed it was, but to punish those who work for a fair and just China, and to intimidate a generation of lawyers and activists from representing or assisting anyone who dares to challenge their authority. After summoning over 300 lawyers, 15 of them were subjected to incommunicado detentions under the so-called residential surveillance at a designated location. This is a practice tantamount to enforced disappearance. During detention, those human rights defenders were subjected to relentless interrogations, sleep deprivation, forced medication, and multiple forms of torture and ill treatment. The objective was very clear. It was to break their bodies and their souls, to compel them to make false confessions, to dismantle their solidarity towards each other, and damage forever their vocation for advocacy and calls for the protections of human rights. The 709 crackdown, as it's called, served as the utmost horrendous display of the violation of all the guarantees of due process. When subjected to trials, authorities interfered with defendants' right to choose their own legal representation. They were often coerced into accepting state-appointed lawyers. They were threatened that if they chose particular representatives, that they in turn would be arrested and professional sanctions such as disbarment would be visited upon them. The weaponization of the law and the judicial system is systematic. Lawyers and law firms involved in politically sensitive cases have their licenses suspended and revoked based on vaguely defined conduct and without any avenues for appeal or support from bar associations. Independent lawyers were denied access to their clients, and they were subjected to surveillance and at times forcibly prevented from leaving their own homes to attend court. Attempts by defendants to object to the indictments were ignored, and in some cases their closing statements to the court were pre-written by state security officials. Public access to trials was really a facade. Diplomats, family members, ordinary observers were all barred from entering the courtrooms. And while hand-picked officials and state media occupied the courtrooms in significant numbers, forced confessions, forged evidence, intimidation of witnesses, routinely reported, but somehow not listened to or heard of in these court proceedings. After detention, human rights defenders who endured torture were not truly free. Many were forcibly relocated, placed under permanent surveillance, and denied their ability to resume their legal practice. Their families, including young children, have endured intimidation and harassment. Their homes are monitored with entrance cameras, their devices are tracked, and security guards shadow them even during routine errands, often amid verbal and physical threats. The story is really horrendous. After that crackdown, the 709 crackdown, which as we've said is 10 years ago now, the same repressive tactics have been employed in the silencing of hundreds of lawyers and human rights defenders since. Big numbers of them unlawfully sentenced to years of imprisonment. Now, with partners, you've heard that I am the director of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute. The International Bar Association has existed since the post-Second World War period, and it was to bring lawyers from all around the world together to create a network in support of each other and in support of the rule of law and legal systems and fair and due process. With partners, we at the Institute have issued a number of public and private interventions in such cases, writing to the courts, writing to the government, putting out statements to the press. And we included participants in the 2019 Xiamen gathering. And I could name a whole set of wonderful lawyers who suffered the consequence of that. I fear that my Chinese might mean that my pronunciation of their names would make them inexplicable to you. And so I apologize for that, but it's a strong list, a list of really dedicated, wonderful lawyers who have suffered state punishment for being lawyers, being defenders of human rights. The intimidation of human rights defenders extends far beyond China's borders. The international legal team, for example, for Jimmy Lai, led by a colleague in my chambers in my own law office, a dear friend, Keelan Gallagher, who's at King's Counsel, have repeatedly reported online harassment, threats, transnational repression, all of it emanating from the Chinese authorities or their henchmen. The Hong Kong authorities have issued arrest warrants, pressed charges carrying potential life sentences against human rights defenders living in exile. Following the law of the Wild West, the authorities have also offered cross-border bounties. They're offering bounties, financial rewards for information leading to the arrest of people who've managed to flee from the long arm of China and its repression. And so it poses real threats to the safety of people who are here in exile, so that punishment doesn't stop at the borders. Abuses against lawyers and human rights defenders prevent them from providing essential legal services to defend the rights of all individuals, including victims of atrocity crimes. The Chinese government has committed serious abuses that may amount to genocide and crimes against humanity targeting Uyghurs and other Turkish communities in the Xinjiang region. So our work at IBARI has noted the mounting reports of arbitrary detention, torture, and the use of Uyghur forced labour in supply chains. So we also have noticed that Uyghur women held in what can only be described as concentration camps are subjected to coercive practices and policies by the Chinese government to control their reproductive capacity. And they really are being coerced into abortion and into sterilisation. The silencing of the legal profession means that individuals from these communities are denied access to proper legal representation and the opportunity to someday receive justice and reparations for what they've suffered. So I'm very pleased to be at this gathering today, and there's colleagues from all around the world. You have a wonderful panel of people, and you will hear from Margaret Satterthwaite, who has been a really fine voice for the UN about what is happening to lawyers and judges around the world. I'm pleased to be as part of this gathering today, and I want us to recognise the importance of the support that we can give to our colleagues in China who are suffering and have suffered so much. We've got to keep alive the hope that truth and justice will prevail. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next, we're going to show a new documentary, 35 minutes, about the 709 Crackdown. The new documentary tries to present a full picture for the first time, actually, what happened in each stage, the arrest, the interrogation, the torture, and the trial. So please enjoy.
Beijing, July 9th, 2015, in the dead of night.
凌晨3点多钟，我们家被断网断电之后，突然间闯进来几十个警察，然后他们就摸黑把我摁到床上，带上背铐，带上背铐，把我拖出门外，拖下楼把我塞进他视线是配备的警车里，把我带走。
当晚带我在顺直机场，刚过。
Beijing, July 9th, 2015, in the dead of night.
凌晨3点多钟，我们家被断网断电之后，突然间闯进来几十个警察，然后他们就摸黑把我摁到床上，带上背铐，把我拖出门外，拖下楼把我塞进他视线配备的警车里，把我带走。
当晚带我在顺直机场，刚过了半点，突然来了一帮人，上来几个就把我那个一边的给那个按住。我就一看到我这个，他也被一边一个架子就走。刚出了那个后机大门，我看外面一堆车，警灯亮，还有镁光灯哗哗闪的，那场景就让我想起了就电影里抓捕江洋大盗的那种感觉。
7月10号早上，我还在睡梦中，突然听到有强烈的撞门声，门被撞开了，冲进来几个黑衣男子，问我叫什么。我刚说出周世峰，话音未落，他们就用胶条粘住我的嘴， 戴上黑头套，反铐我的双手，把我拖到楼下。楼下停着一辆警车，警车旁站着一个持枪男子，枪口朝上。整个过程没有出示任何证件，没有说明任何理由。
7月10日，我去办公室，路上手机显示有很多律师被抓。我在停车场刚停好车下来，一大群人就向我围过来了，我也被捕了。
7月10号下午，警察在我家搜查了几个小时，拿走了跟李和平有关的全部的东西。
More arrests were made on the same day and in the following days in Beijing, including several lawyers and staff members from Feng Rui law firm. Lawyer Li Heping's 2 assistants, lawyer Xie Yanyi, and house church elder Hu Shigun, and more. In Changsha, Guangzhou, and Guilin, respectively, 3 lawyers, Xie Yang, Sui Muqing, and Chen Taihe, were arrested. Around the same time, more than a dozen citizen activists were arrested in Shandong, Jiangsu, and Sichuan provinces. Wu Gan, a renowned activist and a Feng Rui law firm staffer, had been detained in Nanchang in May and had already been secretly transferred to Beijing in late June.
709大抓捕的时候，我并没有被抓捕，我在外面躲了将近1个月。8月3号晚上12点半左右，我在山东济南的一个叫雁泉的露天的游泳的场所，被数十名警察围捕。
In the following weeks, police summoned nearly 300 lawyers and rights defenders across the country, forbidding them from speaking out for those who had been detained. Meanwhile, Communist Party mouthpieces launched an aggressive campaign to frame the events. They confirmed that it was a coordinated operation led by the Ministry of Public Security involving police forces in Beijing and elsewhere.
近日呢，在公安部的部署指挥之下，北京等地警方摧毁了一个以北京丰瑞律师事务所为平台，以该所主任周世峰为首，涉嫌严重扰乱社会秩序的重大犯罪团伙。周世峰、王宇等多人被依法采取刑事强制措施，其中包括9名律师。
They accused the arrested lawyers and citizens of organizing and orchestrating hype around sensitive cases, seriously disrupting social order, and that they were part of a criminal gang suspected of major crimes attempting to pursue hidden motives. In August, the police also arrested lawyer Li Chunfu, the younger brother of lawyer Li Heping, to stop him from helping his brother. In Wenzhou, 2 lawyers were also detained for providing legal services to house churches. A special task force composed of officials from the Ministry of Public Security, local political and legal affairs commissions, local public security bureaus, the procuratorate, and the court was put in charge of the cases. A team of dozens of political police officers conducted interrogations of each detainee.
维权律师是高度敏感词，绝大多数律师事务所会把他们逼走，少数的律师事务所也会在司法局和国保的高压之下把他们拒之门外。整个维权律师群体处于走投无路的境地，出于人类基本的良知和正义，我和我的丰瑞律师事务所接受了他们，为他们提供正常的工作平台。因此在709大抓捕中， 我和我的丰瑞律师事务所成为了当局打击的重点目标。
当时基本上审我就是审我代理的那些案件，主要是一些敏感的案件，比如说苏州的一个范木根他抗强拆一个案件，还有北京一位异议人士曹顺利，他被从首都机场带走，羁押了大概半年左右的时间，最后他死在看守所里。然后另外还主要就是问我的一些像伊利哈木的案件，是包括在沈阳一个法轮功的一个案件，对，所以当时我一个律师，因为我代理一个案件被这种审讯，我想也是一个国家的一个启发。
2014年初春，我和另外3名律师前往黑龙江省建山江调查一个黑监狱，被抓并遭到毒打，几十名律师和公民前往救援。
2015年5月，在黑龙江庆安火车站，一位访民由于遭到非法街访提出抗议，被车站警察当场击毙。我和我的几位同事前往当地调查，为他的家人提供法律援助。
考虑到一个就是火车站是一个公共场所，所以应该会有视频目击证人，所以说我还没去之前，我就很高调的把自己这个消息目击证人消息、照片的这个视频也需要目击，就是说需要这些资料，然后向外发布，然后邮箱啦、电话啦、微信全部就发布出去。在中国，在这种每个公共事件到最后都是以什么结束的？都是以官方定调，然后你要追寻真相的人就被婚杀，网络婚杀也所有婚杀掉，然后就变成一种声音了，他们的声音，最后就是你挖不到，因为所有掌握真相的东西都在他们手上。
我2000年到北京执业，办了很多案件，其中有农民工的、企业家的、意见人士的、不同信仰人士的，还主持过一些项目，如禁止酷刑项目，裁判团模拟法庭等。这些办的案子和主持的项目，后来变成了警察审查我的焦点内容。
在我被抓进看守所的时候，国保问的主要内容当然是民权团，然后我就告诉他，这个制度会促进社会发展，保持先进性，和平稳定的转型发展进步。国保告诉我他的反应是，这个制度违反思想基本原则，颠覆了党的领导。
他们千方百计的想知道我给法轮功辩护的这个动机，为什么给法轮功辩护，为什么给法轮功辩护那么卖命。
基本上是从我89年学潮一直到现在就问了个遍，重点呢就是跟郭飞雄他们这种交往比如说你聚餐沙龙还有这些我代理的这些案件，还有我跟外国使领馆的这种往来，还有出境参会的情况，这个全部都问。
709专案组调查了我所承办案件的所有细节，试图找到我的问题，没有找到，他们就跑到多个省份找我的当事人 动员他们控告我，都被拒绝。我山东的当事人说，周世峰律师法庭辩护半个小时，旁听群众冲破审判庭的阻挠，鼓掌12次，这怎么告人家？
At the turn of this century, China joined the World Trade Organization. Its economy grew rapidly, and China was rising on the international stage. Meanwhile, the Internet brought about the information revolution that helped raise Chinese citizens' rights awareness. Though the government touted the slogan, "Governing the country according to law," in reality, the judiciary serves the Communist Party's political interests. As a result, miscarriages of justice were widespread. A group of lawyers fought for procedural and substantive justice in their practice, defending people's rights, and attempting to redress wrongful convictions. Like the citizens' movement, house churches, and free online expression, the regime came to regard these lawyers' work as a political threat. For the first 6 months, all of the 709 detainees were held incommunicato at secret locations. Each person was detained alone in a room, with thick curtains that let in no light. Around a dozen young armed police officers took turns guarding each detainee 24/7.
被抓之后呢，他们为了侮辱我、恐吓我，采取各种虐待酷刑的手段。当时，10几个女孩子，都是看守我们的，上来把我摁倒，然后把我全身衣裳、内衣外衣全部脱光，而且让我对着摄像头，深蹲3次，而且说如果不深蹲，那就不给我穿衣裳。所以最一开始我虽然不肯，但是后来也没有办法。其实那种情况，哎呀，真的很侮辱人。
突然有一天就开始不给睡觉，他刚开始我都没意识到，这已经开始酷刑了，你知道吗？大概5天5夜就一点都没睡。到这个第5天的凌晨吧，还是什么的，就人呢就突然就崩溃了，这个身体你就感觉，就感觉就不行了，就突然就，要昏过去。那个时候我就意识啊开始有点模糊，我就感觉自己要死了。
有5天5夜，他把我绑在铁椅子上，不让合眼。后来我昏倒在这个铁椅子上，他们把我抓着我的这个手铐那个位置，给我像提小鸡儿那样给我提起来，拍打我。
我们每天被强迫一直一动不动地站立，或者坐在一个没有靠背和扶手的墩子上，有时长达16个小时。
每天被强迫吃药，我就问一个穿白大褂的说，我没有病，你为什么要让我吃药啊？他说，你有没有病不是你说了算，我来这里是执行任务的。
他们喜欢扇耳光，这对我们这种读过书、有思想、有人格的人来说是非常有效的。在经过被这样多次扇耳光后，你感觉了你的思想、你的理想在这儿都是失效的。
大概有2个星期，我被审讯者要求从早晨6点起床到晚上9点甚至更晚，双手高举，一动不动。 那个时候夏天，房间的空调温度是16度，但是我大汗淋漓，衣服都湿透了，真是感觉生不如死，感觉到自己的生命，慢慢的像即将燃尽的蜡烛一样，烛火渐渐熄灭。
张规非常残酷，一个人在房间里，他让你半年时间没有放风，不见天日，在那里面一日就感觉到像世上过了1000年那样，这是真实的感受。
现在你看外面的天晴朗朗的，那时候那6个月，我能见到一丝阳光，心里都感到非常非常激动。那感觉，见到阳光的感觉是真好。那时候对阳光都有一种渴求。
他们就给我带上了几10斤的手铐脚镣，就是不是普通的手铐脚镣，是那种特别重。戴上之后就根本就没有办法走路，7天7夜，无论是睡觉啊、吃饭呀，还是审讯，都是这样戴着。
在天津市看守所，我几次要求见住所检察官，控告专案组非法办案行径，专案组就给我戴上脚镣手铐，脚镣上有40-50公斤重的铅砣子，使我痛苦难忍，即使上厕所也要几个人帮着。
亲情是最柔软的一块有一次他们突然把一张有我孩子跟着他妈妈去看守所找我的照片展示给我看。那时候孩子很小，昂着头，不知道发生了什么。我的内心一下子就崩溃了，嚎啕大哭。
我被抓的时候，妻子刚好怀孕，我想给她写信，鼓励她要坚强。他们不允许，我就绝食抗争。后来获得了纸和笔，可是出来以后才知道，妻子并没有收到我的信。
我们第一回见他，因为他在里面他已经关了1年半了，他受了那么多折磨，一开始见到我就哭了。他当时穿那个蓝色的看守所的制服，那个头发很长，然后胡茬子又很憔悴。那警察哥说给他说，你闺女不是叫谢雅娟吗？在哪个学校上学我们都知道。我告诉你，谢阳，你老婆在哪个学校工作我们都知道。谢阳你也知道，这个长沙的交通状况，他们开车出个车祸，这也是很正常的。其实很明显的就是，我们可以造个车祸让他们一块杀掉嘛。谢阳听那个话，谢阳就很恐惧嘛，很恐惧。因为我当时听那个话，我那个愤怒我那个桌子，我康康的捶那桌子，妈的，我就当时真是想杀人的那种状态。
The ultimate goal of torture and coercive interrogation is to subjugate each of the 709 detainees and force a confession. In every stage, from police investigation to the procuratorate to the court, the effort was focused on extracting an admission of guilt.
我的案件卷宗刚到法院，法官凌空就窜到看守所，冲着我大声喊叫：“光明网说了，你是有罪的，周世峰，你要认清形势，认罪伏法。”这就是709主办法官凌空的话。
我问他们我犯了什么罪啊？他们说，你犯了什么罪你自己不知道吗？
有一次检察院的把我带到了监所之外看守所的办公区域办公室，然后那个从窗外能看到外面这个景色，那时候是春天，绿草茵茵。检察官跟我说，看外面景色多美，想不想出去？只要认罪，就立刻可以出去。
他们要让我认罪，我说我没有罪，怎么认？摩西十诫说，不可做假见证陷害人，这个人也包括自己，不能做假见证陷害自己。
For an entire year after the 709 arrests, there was no news at all about the detainees. Dozens of lawyers, despite immense pressure, repeatedly traveled to places like Tianjin and Changsha, requesting meetings with the detainees from the police and procuratorate authorities, only to be denied every time. They filed countless complaints, but all to no avail.
他们要为我指定律师，我说希望自己请律师。他们告诉我，你请谁，我们抓谁。
法院的人反复跟我说，我们要充分保障你的辩护权，但是你不能自己请律师。
Several wives of the 709 lawyers rose to the occasion and made courageous efforts for the freedom of their husbands. It's the most unexpected and remarkable aspect of the 709 saga.
大家好，我是李文竹。今天是王全璋被羁押的第756天。我现在在最高人民检察院控告天津警方非法阻止家属聘请的律师会见王全璋，请大家关注709，谢谢。他们一直在就是赤裸裸的违法，所以我们今天以这种无法来就是抗议。
其实这个是整个对中国律师群体的一个抓捕，一个迫害。它不但是对中国良心律师的迫害，它更是其实迫害更多的老百姓，更多的维权的，更多的想依律法律能够保护我们的这些更多的人。
因为宪法和法律是国家在这几年里面特别提倡的，要依法治国。所以说无法违法，而且在这当中把普通百姓的权利如此的践踏，这是非常可怕的一件事，不能无法。
对我们。
我们无法，你不能无法。往前走了，往前走了。不能无法，严重。
像王全璋还有一天没回家，我会听着讲，我还要继续，就是请大家再继续关注吧。
709开始的时候，我们其实是一头雾水，在整个709过程中。无论别人觉得状况多差，我会觉得上帝在掌管整个世界，不会差。我不要让负面消极的想法控制我，我的信仰对我影响非常大。
The 709 crackdown sparked a massive international outcry. The United Nations, international bar associations, human rights organizations, and foreign governments all called on China to release the detained lawyers and citizens. In January 2017, in an act of incredible bravery, lawyers Chen Jiangang and Liu Zhengqing published transcripts of their meetings with lawyer Xie Yang, sparking an international media blizzard. It was as though the thick curtains of those secret detention rooms were suddenly drawn open, revealing what was happening inside.
709大抓捕发生后，我一直在做营救和信息传递工作，包括与联合国人权特别报告员见面。我因此在2016年11月被抓。
审讯过程中，多次要让我去上电视，都被我拒绝了。 最后他们为了阻止国际上的认可，他们就强迫我在电视上拒绝美国律师协会2016年给我颁发的一个国际人权奖。当时他们是写好了稿子，一遍一遍的让我背诵，并且大概花了几十次摆拍演练，最后直到他们满意为止。
In August 2016, 1 year after the mass arrests, the Tianjin No. 2 Intermediate People's Court held 4 separate trials for 4 of the 709 detainees. Zhou Shifeng, director of the Feng Rui law firm, Hu Shigun, a house church elder and long-term dissident, and citizen activist Jia Yanmin and Guo Hongguo. These were 4 perfect show trials. Every proceeding was rehearsed in advance. Witnesses read out testimonies prepared by the task force. Each defendant was represented by a government-appointed lawyer. Each admitted guilt. The entire audience was selected by the authorities, and only state media were allowed on site. At the same time, state media launched an extensive propaganda campaign, crafting a sweeping narrative that framed lawyers' normal practice and citizens' rights defense as part of a Western-backed color revolution scheme to undermine China, even though none of the 4 individuals had any association with each other, or was there any evidence that they had any connection to so-called Western anti-China forces. Meanwhile, sensational videos were circulated online, attacking diplomats and foreign journalists who came to observe the trials but were not allowed in.
法院对我的判决充满了荒谬，他们实在找不到我颠覆国家政权罪的任何证据，就将我在7位烧饭局上的一句话改成相反的内容。当我在法庭上对该证据提出质疑的时候，法院居然在判决书上不写我的执证意见。法院还公然剥夺了我的最后陈述权。给我判刑的不是法院，而是天津市政法委时任秘书长张亮等人。不是在法庭上，而是在休息室，张亮当着我的面给我定罪量刑的。而与此同时，法院在另外一个审判庭装模作样的开着我的庭，而这边已经给我定罪量刑了。为了剥夺我的上诉权，法院居然给我特制了一份判决书送达回正，在上面没有法定的征询我是否上诉的栏目。
我问一个人，我说你是法官吗？他说是啊。我说你能独立审判，凭良心审判吗？如果不能凭良心审判，不能独立审判，你还是法官吗？他退后一步，吸了一颗烟，回来说我们是统治阶级的暴力工具。宣判环节我没有按照剧本演出，他们宣判完了，给了30分钟，他们又把原班人马演员全部叫回来，重新演了一次，再宣判了一回。可笑吧？
开庭大概不到2分钟，我就当庭解聘了律师。那按照中国刑事诉讼法的规定，当庭解聘辩护人的法庭必须休庭，重新给这个被告人安排15天的选择辩护人的时间。但是法庭强行继续开庭，我抗议了几次，他们休庭了几次，到后来他们决定不顾一切的往前推进庭审， 我起来准备大声抗议，突然，被7、8个法警用约束团一下子上来把我抱住，我被约束团捆住，我像一只困兽一样大声的咆哮，从法庭的这头到另外一头，他们就死死的按着我，然后法庭就在这个我的大声咆哮声中开庭，庭审结束。公诉人大言不惭地说，庭审程序公正，依法打击王全璋，彰显我国的这个司法公正。
After their release in July 2016, Wang Yu and Bao Longjun were placed under house arrest for a year in Ulaanbaatar, Inner Mongolia. In April 2017, lawyer Li Heping was secretly tried in Tianjin and sentenced to 3 years in prison with a 4-year reprieve. In May and November, lawyers Xie Yang and Jiang Tianyong were tried respectively in Changsha. In December, Wu Gan was secretly tried in Tianjin and sentenced to 8 years in prison. In December 2018, lawyer Wang Chuanjiang was secretly tried and sentenced to 4 years in prison. Secret trials were held in secret only because the court couldn't achieve perfect show trials. What was put on trial was lawyers' work and citizens' rights. The interrogators told the 709 lawyers repeatedly that, through this crackdown, the authorities intended to draw a red line that neither civil society nor lawyers would dare to cross. In essence, 709 was an act of terror against the community of human rights lawyers. 10 years on, the suppression of lawyers has not relented. Since 2015, nearly 50 human rights lawyers have had their licenses revoked. More lawyers have been imprisoned, more law firms have been shut down. To this day, the 709 lawyers are still under malicious surveillance, banned from leaving the country, and their families, including children, are affected. Their ability to work and live a normal life is hindered at every turn. Contrary to the government's framing, they are in fact a bright spot in an otherwise unscrupulous legal system. Their pursuit is also the pursuit of countless Chinese people. Without justice, a country has no future. The fate of these lawyers is thus a barometer of China's fate as a country.
So let's continue. Now we invite Ms. Margaret Satterthwaite, the UN Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers, to speak. Ms. Satterthwaite, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear friends, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. It is a true honor to join this august panel today. Today we mark a somber anniversary. Over the past decade, China has increasingly used legal and administrative mechanisms to restrict lawyers working on human rights issues. Some of what I will say has already been said, and indeed we've seen a very moving and evocative film. And things that I say now will be said again, but I think it's important for me as the UN Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers to again state the truth. This is a truth that has been denied, punished, and hidden. Therefore, our repetition of this truth matters, as it insists on a reality that must not be repressed. Although constraints on lawyers existed before 2015, the attempts to control lawyers escalated dramatically in July 2015 during what became known as the 709 Crackdown, when a broad swath of lawyers, legal assistants, and human rights defenders were arbitrarily detained, questioned, forcibly disappeared, and tortured. Many were held in incommunicado under national security charges, with some subjected to residential surveillance at a designated location, a regime known for enabling torture and enforced disappearances. While the 709 Crackdown did not mark the beginning of a repression against the legal profession in China, it represented a sharp escalation of state control over the profession. In 2008, the Ministry of Justice adopted the Measures on Administration of Law Firms and the Administrative Measures for the Practice of Law by Lawyers. These were amended in 2016 and again in 2018, introducing even stricter requirements, including loyalty pledges, mandatory reporting requirements, and provisions holding law firms responsible for their lawyers' actions. These revised measures significantly undermined the independence of the legal profession by increasing political oversight and enabling broad discretionary punishment. 10 years on, the crackdown continues to have widespread repercussions. Vaguely defined national security concepts such as picking quarrels and provoking trouble, or inciting subversion of state power under Articles 293 and 105 of the criminal law, respectively, are routinely invoked to criminalize legal advocacy and dissent. Lawyers and their families continue to face disbarment, surveillance, travel bans, housing and employment restrictions, and other forms of administrative punishment. Due process rights are routinely violated through restricted access to legal counsel, the imposition of government-appointed lawyers, and closed-door trials. These patterns have had a chilling effect across the legal profession, including on those defending 709 affiliated lawyers or engaging with the UN human rights system. Allow me to review some of the key developments and concerns from the perspective of my mandate as UN Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers. It's important to note that the government of China has often denied, dismissed, or retaliated against those who have brought human rights violations to the attention of international observers. On July 15, 2015, just days after the crackdown began, 6 special procedures mandate holders, including mine, issued a joint communication raising serious concerns about arbitrary detention, incommunicado detention, enforced disappearance, and violations of the basic principles on the role of lawyers. China responded, rejecting the allegations, portraying the detained lawyers as instigators of unrest, and defending the crackdown as lawful and necessary to uphold public order and the rule of law. Since 2015, my mandate has issued or joined some 30 formal communications related to the crackdown and its subsequent developments. China has responded to 23 of them, mostly denying any wrongdoing or justifying its actions under domestic law. Notably, 20 of these 30 communications, so 2/3, were sent between 2020 and 2020, indicating a worsened repression of lawyers and defenders. It is implemented under vague national security charges and without proper judicial oversight. enabling prolonged incommunicado detention and increasing the risk of torture and enforced disappearance. In 2018, a joint communication use of RSDL, calling for its repeal and highlighting its utter incompatibility with international human rights law. With respect to the profession of lawyer, my mandate issued a communication in February 2024 analyzing the provisions and amendments to 2 Chinese administrative regulations, the administrative measures for the practice of law by lawyers and the measures on the administration of law firms, which entered into force between 2016 and 2018. My mandate noted that these regulations are not in line with international standards related to the right to a fair trial and its guarantees, and may in their application limit the functions of lawyers in China by restricting both their work and their freedoms. The mandate also highlighted the patterns revealed from the applications of these measures since they were first implemented, as well as issues arising when lawyers are sentenced, which are also not in line with international human rights standards. The communication expressed grave concern that relatives of lawyers, including underage children, also are experiencing deleterious consequences resulting based on their family members. These include eviction, the obligation to move numerous times under duress, constant threats and repeated cuts to their gas and electricity supply, as well as pressure on schools to not allow the children of these lawyers to register, leading to violations of the rights of lawyers' children. The mandate offered benchmarks and technical assistance to bring the relevant legal framework into line with human rights standards. To date, China has not responded to this communication. A general communication was also issued in 2024 reiterating concerns about ongoing reprisals, the misuse of national security laws, and the institutional weaknesses that prevent an independent legal profession in China. In particular, this communication expressed concern about reprisals against individuals for cooperating with the UN. A new communication, which is still confidential, has been sent to China highlighting the ongoing repression and marking the 10-year anniversary of 709. Although 10 years have passed since the initial wave of arrests, the crackdown continues for the independence of the legal profession are still lacking. These severe and pervasive interferences in the independence of the legal profession open the door to systematic violations of the right to a fair trial for all. Today, I renew my call for the repeal of RSDL, the full restoration of legal protections for lawyers, and the reform of national legislation to bring it into conformity with international human rights standards. The independence of the legal profession, a cornerstone of the rule of law, must be established in China. To close, I underscore that despite the hostile environment and the threat of severe, life-altering violations, many human rights lawyers and defenders in China continue their work with courage and resilience. Today, I commend these lawyers and pledge to stand by their side with great respect and solidarity. I call on lawyers across the world to join me in this pledge, especially those lawyers who have contacts and relationships with the government of China. Do not remain silent. Instead, together, with all of you here in person and online, with those not yet here but who will soon join us, together we will insist on the truth. We will insist on human rights. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Roman Zapsek. Excuse me if I didn't, the representative from CCBE, if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. Our next speaker is the first vice president of the Council of Bars and the Law Societies of Europe. CCBE has a constant and unwavering supporter for Chinese human rights lawyers for all these years, for the entire span of repression of human rights lawyers. So let's hear his remark.
Thank you very much for the floor. So I would say just at the beginning, good day or good evening to everybody. I hope you hear me clearly, because I see I have some interrupted voice coming out from. So you hear me clearly?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well then I will start. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address you today at this important event marking the 10th anniversary of the 709 crackdown on human rights lawyers in China. But before I start, let me just allow you to present who we are. The CCB represents the Bars and Law Society of 46 countries, of the members of the Council of Europe, and through them, more than 1 million lawyers. We place a great emphasis on the respect for human rights and the rule of law, and in particular, we are concerned by the situation of lawyers worldwide. Lawyers play an essential role in the justice system. They protect the rule of law, ensure access to justice for all citizens, and safeguard fundamental rights and freedoms. Because of this vital role, lawyers and the legal profession are often subject to significant pressure from state and non-state actors. When lawyers are victims of human rights violations, the CCB acts by alerting relevant national authorities and their embassies. The CCB stands and publishes letters of support to ensure that attacks on the legal profession are brought to light and that lawyers can carry out their professional duties without fear of reprisal, intimidation, or harassment. Since 2010, the CCB has sent almost 1,000 letters in support of thousands of endangered lawyers in over 90 countries. In the last 5 years, the CCB sent more than 50 lawyers to the Chinese authorities. We cooperate with other bars, international lawyers organizations, and human rights NGOs, initiatives like the Day of the Endangered Lawyers, and the conferences and webinars like this one. We relay information to the European Union, the Council of Europe, and the United Nations. We publish annual overviews and statistics on attacks against lawyers, and we award the annual CCB Human Rights Awards to honor lawyers or organizations demonstrating outstanding commitments to fundamental values. 3 CCB Human Rights Awards were already granted to the Chinese lawyers. In 2008, Human Rights Award was granted to lawyer Li Haiping. In 2015, it was granted to Feng Rui, a Chinese law firm which was particularly targeted during the 709 crackdown. And in 2023, the award was granted to lawyers Hang Tung Chou, Xu Jingyong, and Ding Yaxi. Organizes also the CCB Amicus Curiae contest for law students and trainee lawyers to support threatened lawyers and raise the awareness among future legal professionals. We have been consistent and vocal supporter of the endangered lawyers in China, especially since 709 crackdown began on July 9, 2015. On that day, Chinese authorities launched a large-scale crackdown on human rights lawyers and defenders, arresting many lawyers and associates, subjecting them to secret detention and torture, interrogating them or threatening them across the country. Within this context, the CCB issued numerous letters of support, and protest to Chinese authorities denouncing arbitrary detention, disbarment, and ongoing prosecution of lawyers in China. These letters are publicly available on the CCB Human Rights portal and serve as a record of international concern and solidarity. We work with international partners to bring global attention to the plea of Chinese lawyers and advocate for their rights at the EU, United Nations, and other forums. We participated in joint initiatives and commemorative events like today's to renew support for Chinese human rights lawyers, recognize their sacrifice, and keep hope alive that truth and justice will prevail. The 709 crackdown was not an isolated event, but was part of a broader campaign against civil society in China. Even a decade later, lawyers continued to face surveillance, travel bans, censorship, disbarment, and arbitrary detention. Therefore, the CCB remains steadfast in its support for these lawyers, who, despite their small numbers, are a crucial link in the struggle for justice and the rule of law in China. So, within this context of general crackdown against lawyers worldwide, the adoption of the Council of Europe Convention on the Protection of the Profession of Lawyer marks a historic milestone. It is the first binding international treaty dedicated to safeguarding lawyers and their professional association, responding to the alarming rise in attacks, threats, harassment, and interference against lawyers, especially when handling sensitive cases or defending unpopular clients. We initiated this idea for the convention in 2016 and played a pivotal role throughout its actively contributed as an observer in the Committee of Experts, ensuring the convention's provisions will protect the diversity of legal systems across Europe. The CCB advocated for robust protection for lawyer-client confidentiality, the independence of bars and law staff, and the creation of an effective monitoring system. Let me just briefly mention basic provisions of the conventions. Independence and autonomy, which guarantees the independence of the lawyers and their professional associations, ensuring they can operate free from interference by state or non-state actors. Professional rights affirms the right of lawyers to provide legal advice, represent clients, including in sensitive or politically charged cases, and to have prompt access to clients and maintain confidentiality in all communications. Protection from unlawful actions requires states to protect lawyers from threats, harassments, arbitrary detention, unjust disciplinary proceedings, and to conduct effective investigation into attacks or threats against lawyers. Access to the profession ensures that admission, retention, and readmission to the legal profession are based on objective, transparent criteria and are taken by independent bodies with the right to appeal. And finally, fair disciplinary procedures, which establishes fair, impartial, and transparent procedures for disciplinary matters, safeguarding the independence of the legal profession. The Convention itself also provides a monitoring system which safeguards those basic principles. The monitoring system is two-tier. The so-called GRAVO, Group of Experts of the Protection of Professional Lawyer, and the other tier, the Committee of Parties. What is the practical impact of the Convention? lawyers will be able to invoke the Convention in national and international proceedings to defend their rights. The Convention also extends protection to persons assisting lawyers and to those facing refusal or revocation of their professional status in contradiction with the safeguards provided in the Convention. The Convention was signed by 17 member states on 17 May. It will enter into force after at least 8 countries, including 6 Council of Europe member states, have ratified. After the Convention enters into force, other non-member states may be invited to accede the Convention and therefore sign and ratify as well. This Convention is not only about protecting lawyers, it is about safeguarding the very foundation of the rule of law. When lawyers can perform their duties free from fear and interference, they defend the rights of all individuals, uphold justice, and assure the right access to the legal system for everyone. The Convention is a binding standard and a robust monitoring mechanism. It will help to ensure accountability, protect professional self-governance, and reinforce public trust in justice. We are proud to have initiated a convention and is committed to ensure its swift ratification and effective implementation within Europe and beyond. We call on all states to join this effort to protect lawyers everywhere and through them to defend the rights and freedom for all. We hope in this regard that one day China sign and ratify this convention so that lawyers in China are able to carry out their professional duties without fear of reprisal, hindrance, intimidation, or harassment, in order to preserve the independence and integrity of the justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roman. We were very encouraged, and as far as I know, Chinese human rights lawyers repeatedly have expressed appreciation for the support from their international colleagues. Thank you, and thank you, CCBE.
It was our great pleasure, and we will support Chinese lawyers also in the future.
I believe it will continue. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you. Our next speaker, Yohei Suda, is attorney at law in Japan. He's currently the chairperson of the International Human Rights Committee of the Japan Federation of Bar Associations. 中文观众们，我们预先为徐田洋平律师的讲话准备了中文翻译，请看直播屏幕右边的聊天框。The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I feel so honored to speak in front of you tonight. Well, I'm Yohei Suda. I'm a chairperson. I'm a chairperson of the International Human Rights Committee of the Japan Federation of Bar Associations. However, tonight I speak in the capacity as an individual human rights defender rather than as a chairperson. So what I speak from now is a view of my own rather than the view of the Japan Federation of Bar Associations. Today we gather to mark 10 years since the 709 crackdown in China, a day that will be forever remembered as a stark warning to legal professionals around the world that the law in the hands of the authoritarian power can be weaponized against those who are supposed to protect it. On July 9, 2015, Chinese authorities began a sweeping campaign of arrests, disappearances, and intimidation, targeting human rights attorneys, legal scholars, and other human rights defenders. Over 300 individuals were affected. Many were detained incommunicado, held in residential surveillance at a designated location, tortured, coerced into confessions, and later disbarred or imprisoned. The goal was clear: to erase a growing community of lawyers who dare to challenge state power and defend the rights of dissidents, petitioners, and minorities. Among them were figures like Wang Quanzhang, who was held in secret for a long period of time, and Lin Heping, who faced torture for simply fulfilling his professional duty. Their cases are not isolated stories. They represent a systematic attempt to silence the defenders of human rights and guardians of justice. The 709 crackdown was a blatant violation of the basic principles on the role of lawyers, adopted in 1990 by the United Nations. The Principle 16 affirms that government shall ensure that lawyers are able to perform all of their professional functions without intimidation, hindrance, harassment, or improper interference, are able to travel and to consult with their clients freely both within their home country and abroad, and shall not suffer or be threatened with prosecution or administrative, economic, or other sanctions for any action taken in accordance with recognized professional duties, standards, and ethics. The Principle 18 affirms that lawyers Thank you. The Principle 18 affirms that lawyers shall not be identified with their clients or their clients' causes as a result of discharging their functions. The Principle 23 affirms that lawyers, like other citizens, are entitled to freedom of expressions, belief, association, and assembly. In particular, they shall have the right to take part in public discussion of matters concerning the law, the administration of justice, and the promotion and the protection of human rights, and to join or form local, national, or international organizations and attend their meetings without suffering professional restrictions by reason of their lawful action or their membership in a lawful organization. In addition, the 709 crackdown is also a blatant violation of the Convention Against Torture, to which China is a party. Chinese authorities torture those human rights defenders who are arrested and detained. If we believed this repression would stop at the border of mainland China, we were mistaken. In recent years, Hong Kong, once a beacon of legal independence in Asia, has seen a rapid erosion of the rule of law under the guise of the national security law. Since 2020, pro-democracy attorneys have faced legal harassment, disbarment procedures, and politically motivated arrests. The Law Society has increasingly been pressured to align with Beijing's political agenda. On November 19, 2024, a court in Hong Kong harshly sentenced 45 prominent pro-democracy figures on national security charges. The truth is undeniable. What was done yesterday in Beijing is being done today in Hong Kong. This creeping authoritarianism is not only a regional tragedy, but a globalist threat. The international legal community must respond. China is in blatant violation of those principles, both in its mainland and in Hong Kong. Let's be clear. When a government targets lawyers, it's not just targeting individuals. It's attacking the rule of law itself. As we remember the victims of July 9, 2015, and as we witness the ongoing repression in Hong Kong, we must ask ourselves, what will tomorrow bring if we remain silent today? We call on the international legal community, including bar associations, law schools, human rights organizations, and the democratic governments, to publicly condemn the persecution of lawyers in China and Hong Kong, offer legal, financial, and moral support to targeted lawyers and their families, and ensure that trade and diplomacy with China are not conducted at the expense of human rights and judicial independence. Solidarity is not a slogan, it's a responsibility. So let us stand together and let us defend the law by defending the lawyers who uphold it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, Professor Terence Halliday, is a research professor at the American Bar Association. For the past 15 years, his research has focused on China's criminal defense and rights lawyers, and he wrote 2 books about it. He's very experienced and well-researched in this area, and he has interviewed many human rights lawyers and befriended them before 709. 中文观众们，我们预先为美国律师基金会哈里迪教授的讲话准备了中文翻译，请看屏幕右边的聊天框。The floor is yours, Professor Halliday.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to honor China's bravest defense lawyers and to keep hope alive. 9 is a landmark in modern Chinese history. It is also of the utmost significance to recognize that it is a key marker and a consequential moment in a global struggle. That struggle is at least 4 centuries long, and it has taken place on all continents. Today I present some key findings from 35 years of research on lawyers' struggles worldwide, and my 20 years of research on China's rights lawyers, including several of those lawyers we have just seen in the wonderful video created by China Change. First, the global struggle. In the past 400 years, there has been a remarkable legal achievement. Historians document how struggles beginning in 17th century England and 18th century France spread across Europe, then across the world, and into the 21st century to create legal institutions that enabled markets to thrive, politics to be responsive to citizens, and civil society to be vibrant spheres of association in countries on every transformation of law, markets, politics, and society has had 3 elements. First, basic legal freedoms were established to provide effective constitutional protections from arbitrary arrest and torture, protections provided by legal counsel, guarantees of due process in judicial hearings, and secure property rights. Second, civil society was set free from control by a state, so citizens could worship freely, travel readily, and form into groups of 1,000 voluntary kinds that are substantially self-governed and self-regulating. And third, laws and legal political institutions were constructed to limit the arbitrary power of the state and its coercive arms, such as the police and the military. Independence of judiciaries is one of civilization's highest achievements. And together these transformations have created open zones of freedom for residents, energized the powers of ordinary citizens, spurred immense economic growth, multiplied these by voluntary associations, and opened to orderly competition to citizen needs and citizen wants. These elements come together to form what we name as democracies, as rule of law societies, as open civil societies, as governments ordered by constitutions that temper state power. Extensive evidence demonstrates that many legal occupations can take the lead. Private lawyers, such as those attacked in the 709 crackdown, are frequently at the forefront. But they also find and need other allies in the law. Public lawyers, judges, legal scholars, bar associations, and entire legal complexes. In this vast global movement from England in the 1600s to France in the 1700s to historically verified cases in Africa, Latin America, South Asia, and East Asia up to the present, lawyers have insisted on defending their clients, judges have taken bold stands in their decisions and even in the streets, legal academics have written constitutions and drafted laws, and one-party monopolies have been, laws, and arbitrary actions by absolute monarchs, authoritarians, military dictators, and one-party monopolies have been held accountable and ultimately compelled to yield to the tempering of their power. This global struggle has been evident in Asia. Scholars show that the march to basic legal freedoms, to an open civil society, to a moderate state surrounds China. A small band of lawyers in the 1970s led the way for South Korea's military rule to crumble, and joined by prosecutors, legal academics, private lawyers, led to the remarkable economic and political transformations of this once colonized, poor and peripheral society. In the 1980s, lawyers in Taiwan began their struggle against the authoritarian KMT, and they joined with an increasingly active civil society to produce an economic miracle and largely violence-free political revolution in what is now an open political society where law holds rulers accountable. After the handover to China in 1996, Hong Kong, and most notably its barristers, fought to protect Hong Kong's late colonial reputation for rule of law, a regime that allowed business to thrive and civil society to be open and energized, whether in voluntarism or marching for defensive rights in the millions in the streets. The 709 crackdown therefore symbolizes one more pivotal moment in the long march to freedom all over the world. It is not a long march that ends in a one-party dictatorship. It is a long march where basic legal freedoms are protected, where civil society is energetic and free from state control, and where the state itself is limited in the exercise of power by laws that really matter. So why is it important to know that 709 stands as a landmark in world history? We can learn from elsewhere, past and present, and four conclusions can be applied to China today. First, in every type of government where people are repressed, whether they be absolute monarchies, military dictatorships, big man regimes, fascist and communist totalitarians, one-party states, there will be a welling up, a movement from below, a striving for liberation. Freedom cannot be repressed forever, and it certainly will not be crushed forever in China. Second, very often it is lawyers who are the point of the spear, the leading of the valiant vanguard. And it's lawyers of all sorts, as we have seen, and lawyers in many forms, outstanding individuals such as Gao Zhejiang, bar associations such as the aims of the Beijing bar election in 2008 and 2009, networks of like-minded activists, several hundred in lawyers' rights networks, some of whom we heard about earlier, and certainly professors, some prosecutors, and even a brave judge or two. Third, lawyers cannot do it alone. Yes, they have a philosophy, such as rule of law, as Hong Kong lawyers have loudly defended. Yes, they are experienced at representing others. They can be spokespersons, as Baroness Kennedy has been across the world. Yes, they have stages on which their voices can be projected into the public domain, whether from courtrooms or court steps. You've seen it in Malaysia and across China. Yes, they can draw on professional solidarities far beyond their own countries, as we see from the notable sponsors of today's event. But they need the people. And who are these people? They are civil society associations, groups of people who come together to organize themselves, to fight for a cause, against pollution, against discrimination, against all the harms that China's Communist Party performs on its own citizens. They are religious groups, churches which bring powerful spiritual beliefs to guide and fortify the long march to freedom. Protestant unofficial churches in China, segments of the Roman Catholic Church in Hong Kong, led by Cardinal Zen, and Protestant Christians also in Hong Kong. There are women's groups who can bring half a society into the public square and reach to the grassroots far from the big urban centers. In the 21st century, struggles for basic legal freedoms inside a country also, and fourthly, activate the international sphere. There is an international legal complex, as we are seeing today, of bar associations, such as the International Bar Association and the CCBE. There are courts, legal networks, judicial and academic lawyers organizations, the International Commission for Justice, among others. There are international China rights groups that keep the spotlight shining on injustice in China, on the cruelties of the party. China Change and other organizations of this event are prominent cases in point. There are international human rights groups like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. There are international governmental institutions such as the UN Human Rights Council, its rapporteurs, as we have heard today, the European Union, as we have heard today. There are international publics informed by old media institutions like The Guardian, Le Monde, New York Times, and the new social media. There are foreign governments, the Congressional Executive Commission on China in the United States, the UK Parliamentary Group, vocal spokespersons in the European Parliament. I have documented how their combined power refused to allow Wang Yu or Li Heping to disappear from the site at the height of the 709 disappearances. And we can see daily that they refuse to allow China's imprisoned rights lawyers to be forgotten. Indeed, these persons of courage symbolize to the world the fears and repression of China's leaders that their coercive power cannot survive. I conclude with the notion of a sociology of hope. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with specialists on democracy, constitutionalism, and the rule of law in Eastern Europe. Just as China's leaders feared a color revolution in China, these scholars showed how much their escape from authoritarianism and their current struggles depend on lawyers and legal complex. I call this a sociology of hope. We have seen it in Eastern Europe in the past 40 years. We have witnessed it in South Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in the 20th century. This sociology of hope points to the 709 lawyers, to those participating in this event, to China's suppressed civil society, to coalitions of international organizations, to global publics. It reveals that all the elements for transformation in China are already there. We cannot know if it will be 5 years or 50 years until the hopes of the 709 lawyers become the institutions of a new China. We can know that it must happen and will happen in China, and thus together we and all those we lead will keep hope alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Halliday. Every time I listen to you, remind me why I like to talk to you so much, because you always gives me hope. It's your sense of hope is irresistible. So we'll continue. I would really love to sit down and chat with you, but we have to move on. Our next speaker, Li Fangping, is a Our next speaker, Li Fangping, is a prominent Chinese human rights lawyer who started practicing law in China in 1995. He will speak in Chinese. We have prepared an English translation of lawyer Li Fangping's remarks. It's shown in the chat box on your screen. Please check it out. Thank you. The floor is yours. 开始讲吧。
好，各位女士先生，大家好。今天我就谈一个比较大的一个题目啊，就是谈谈中共法治的奠基、重建和改革。中共的话，首颁宪法的话已经超过70载，如何总结其法治的进程，势必得失的话论述。第一，中共的建国之父们本身就是摧毁法治的集体行动者。1954年，宪法规定保护资本家的生产资料所有权、公民房屋所有权、继承权、辩护权、言论自由、迁徙等众多自由。但是宪法墨迹未干，运动接踵而至，公民权利的话消失殆尽。1955年肃反，中共提出对这一次运动清查出来的反革命分子和坏分子集中起来进行劳动教养，如此不经法院决定就可以剥夺人身自由。1956年实行资本主义工商业私有房屋社会主义改造，资本家的生产资料所有权、公民房屋所有权被剥夺，随后类似的房屋继承权也被剥夺。1957年反右，言论自由被剥夺，废除律师制度，辩护权被剥夺。1958年大跃进引发大饥荒和逃荒潮。1961年1月，中共批转公安部的关于制止人口自由流动的报告，建立收容遣送制度，剥夺了迁徙自由。1958年8月，毛泽东在一次会议上称，我们每个会议的决议都是法，开会也是法，我们各项规章制度我们基本不靠这些，主要靠决议开会，1年搞4次，不能靠民法刑法来维持秩序。当时的国家主席刘少奇如何复核呢？到底是法治还是人治？看来实际靠人，法律只能作为办事的参考。不是文革4人帮破坏了法治，早在宪法颁行几年之内，中共的建国之父们就把法治砸坏了。2. 改革开放的法治重建的奠基就有悖于法治。 邓小平、彭真等中共领导人重新上台，虽然提出说要重建社会主义，要健全社会主义法治，但这些法治重建的奠基者们只是工具性的看待和利用法治，必要时又毫不犹豫地践踏法治。法治重建之初，有一个人两件事，我想剖析一下说明。一个人是中共党史称之为社会主义法治主要奠基人的彭真，他先后担任了政法书记、人大常委会人大委员长。改革之初，他在新世纪的政法工作中提出，政法机关政治上、思想上、组织上必须纯洁，政法队伍要忠于党、忠于社会主义。法治奠基人给政法机关、政法人员所奠定的政治底色的话，这是中国法治重建和改革不变的基石。两件事是指1980年对林彪将军的两岸审判和83年严打的两个司法领域的重大事件。司法部为两岸辩护的话，专门制定的律师会见处理办法规定，会见的目的是让被告人接受律师为之辩护，要讲究斗争策略，力争多了解情况与动态，为审判工作提供有利的条件。二，被告人要求律师做无罪辩护的处理办法，因婉言拒绝，可做如下解释：做无罪辩护不仅是困难的，而且也对你也是不利的。指导得很细很细。可见两岸的审判仅从律师会见来看，并不是保护辩护权，而是官方通过操控律师进行政治表演。1983年，邓小平发动严打运动时称，我们不叫搞运动，是不搞整人的运动，但是应该把严重犯罪分子当作敌我矛盾来处理。随后，中共的严打文件规定，在党委的统一领导下，党政军等有关部门齐动手，把判处死刑的权限下放到区县一级的法院，同级的党委领导可以直接决定判处死刑。上诉期的话，也由法律规定的10天缩短为3天。这些措施的话，都没有经过修法程序就马上实施。类似于1983年严打这种司法领域的政治运动，一直延续至今。1998年的郑家法轮功，2009年重庆的打黑除恶，2018年的全国扫黑除恶，它的治理逻辑都是大同小异的。当然，改革开放的法治建设也是有的，短短10年内构建了刑法、民法、行政诉讼法、经济合同法等一些基本的法律运行体系。3。1992年，邓小平南方讲话后，在稳定压倒一切的前提下，启动了新的法治改革。南方讲话后，政治冰封就有所消融，市场加维稳的新体制得以建立。市场化的推进使律师制度改革成为法治改革的前沿突破口。过往苏联模式的法律顾问处的话，1992年以后逐步转型为合伙制律师事务所，律师获得了更大的自主权。1990年10年间的话，中国先后出台民事诉讼法、新刑法、新刑诉法，废除了殊荣遣送制度，律师可以在侦查阶段会见和辩护。反革命罪的话也更名为危害国家安全罪，弱化了原先的敌我斗争性质。1998年10月，中国政府还签署了公民权利和政治权利国际公约。1999年3月，依法治国路线。中西方紧张关系松动以后的话，西方的法学思想、法治原则、人权理念，通过各种法治和学术交流的话进入中国。2010年6月，法官、检察官、律师纳入统一的国家司法考试，法学也成为了显学。2003年 SARS 爆发，公共卫生危机带动了公民权利意识的高涨，所谓的维权运动来了。孙志刚事件，民间舆论发酵，官方废除了殊荣遣送制度。2004年3月，国家尊重和保障人权路线。此时内生而成的维权律师群体的话，更加活跃于践行法治和保障人权的 历史舞台。中国官方的话，为了改善国内形象，2006年发布了《北京奥运会及其储备期间外国记者、港澳记者采访规定》，并在奥运会后予以延续。2007年还通过了政府信息公开条例。2013年，当局决定废除劳动教养制度，这是改革正面推进的最后决项。与此同时的话，官方的管控、压制和对外的欺骗性宣传的话，也是跟进的。早在06年，全国律协的话就发布关于律师办理群体性案件的指导意见。2008年7月，奥运组委会称，北京已经设置了专门供游行示威人员表达意愿的地点。当时的话赢得了一片国际喝彩，但在维稳体制下，没有批准一起申请。2011年修改身份证法，增加警察可以在火车站、汽车站港口、机场查验身份证，以便对上访人群还有异议人士进行流动管控。同样也是这一年，因为中东的茉莉花事件，国内的话对维权异议人士采取了大规模的强迫失踪措施。第二年，为了合法化，马上修改刑事诉讼法，制定了指定监视居住的条款。第四，2015年以来，法治改革进入了显著的逆转期。2015年，政法机关是党的刀把子的中共的老的话语体系的话公开回归，可以视为法治改革显著逆转的开端。2015年1月，习近平就政法工作指示称，确把刀把子牢牢掌控在党和人民手中。中央的政法工作会议的话，随即传达了习的指示，并通过各级党报、公检法报刊的话进行宣传鼓动。过去10年，我个人总结，大概标志着法治溃败的话5个标志性事件。一个是今天我们纪念的709 10周年的这个事件。第二一个就2018年3月，国家主席任期修宪，整个过程秘密、急速、禁言，没有辩论，没有反对，没有批评，给这个法治建设带来深远的负面影响。第三，2018年监察法出台，创制了一个监督机制高度缺失的党国司法怪兽，公民权利再度遭到削弱。第四，修改政府信息公开条例和裁判文书公开制度，限制申请资格，增加不公开范围，甚至主动公开成为例外。第五，强化所谓国家安全立法。官方报道，最近10年有20余部国家安全专门立法接连出台，我们查了一下，还有很多在出笼中。国务院都在细密编制当中。好，谢谢。
Our next speaker, lawyer Li Jinxing, is also a very prominent Chinese human rights lawyer. He started practicing law in China in 2003 and is particularly known for seek to redress wrongful convictions. He's very famous for that. The floor is yours, Li律师，请。
谢谢各位，我是原中国律师李金清。刚才的电影有我的多幅照片。2015年709，我的北京的 NGO 喜源网被抄家。我因为当时在办理一起重大案件，也是公安部挂牌的案件的辩护，需要几十天连续出现在法庭，侥幸逃脱了709的大抓捕。
我想谈一下我对709的认识。709运动的实质，在我看来是对中国改革开放有限成就的否定。根据我的亲身感受，这场运动标志着中国政治改革完全停止，而且大幅度倒车，取而代之的是对中国公民运动的全面镇压。这场运动的目的，表面针对律师，实际是试图让中国社会管制回到毛泽东时代，回到文化大革命。709不仅仅是针对律师，大量的无辜公民同样也被残酷的对待。709的镇压手法是极其残忍的，刚才的电影当中，我们已经看到了极其残忍的刑讯逼供。其实也有通过行政当局、律师协会有关政治警察的频繁骚扰、监控，甚至对于709当事人的孩子们也没有放过。我们必须强调，709运动又不是孤立的，与这一个运动一起精心实施的是对于国内 NGO 强化管理甚至取消，对于传统媒体行业的整治，对于互联网自媒体的全面肃整，对于民营企业家的打压，拆除基督堂十字架，对于民办教育系统的整顿，对香港自由与法治的镇压，这些都是所谓全面国家安全观的系统策略。709的镇压不仅仅局限在2015年的7月9日，我们也必须注意到，709在今天的中国已经是常态化。今天的中国每天都在发生针对中国公民、中国律师的709式的镇压行为。我希望中国当局能够倾听外界的呼声。709镇压政治运动是完全错误的，这不仅违反了中国的宪法，又与中国试图树立的国际开放形象不符，它对国际社会传达的信号也是非常糟糕的。我呼吁国际社会继续关注709运动受害者的当事人和他们的亲人。事实上，709当事人，我了解到，不管是坐牢的，还是刑满释放的，还是吊销律师证书的，绝大多数都面临艰难的境地。他们的基本生活保障、他们的医疗、子女上学、父母赡养、再就业，都遇到了我们一般人无法知晓的困难。他们基本上被限制出境，在中国遭受了严密的监控，而且根据我自己的了解，很多人受到酷刑之后存在严重的精神创伤，无论对于个人、对于家庭，这些创伤都是非常严重的。我特别提醒关注仍然在狱中的徐志勇、丁家喜、于文生、谢阳等律师，他们都是我的战友。我也请继续关注已经失踪多年、生死不明的高志胜律师。我也特别请求国际社会关注李和平律师的孩子、王全璋律师的孩子，他们在中国无法接受正规的基础教育，孩子们想出国却被限制出境，理由是这些未成年孩子也会危害国家安全。我想以亲身的经历告诉在座的各位，国际社会对709的声援与关注价值是无可替代的，你们的工作是极其有价值的。虽然你们很难得到中国709当事人的直接回应，那是因为国内残酷的镇压环境让他们无法回应你们，但是你们的每一次关注都会给他们以极大的鼓舞，并让中国当局有所忌惮。如果没有在座的各位的以及国际社会的关注，他们面临的情况一定 会糟糕。我在709过程当中，迄今不能忘记，我看到美国律师协会、欧盟律师协会、欧盟各个国家的律师协会，以及台湾、香港律师关注组以及日本律师协会对中国人权律师的关注，我们备受鼓舞。因此，我也想借这样一个机会，特别想代表709受害律师和公民们，对于你们，对于来自关心和声援，表示深深的感谢。谢谢。
谢谢金星律师，一听就是从心里来的，从亲身体验来的，非常感人。Our next speaker is Tomoko Ako. She is a professor in the Graduate School of Arts and Science at the University of Tokyo. Her research interests include empowerment of socially vulnerable people with a particular focus on China. Ako is also the executive director of Asia Lawyers Network.
Thank you for coming to our university tonight, for having this event. 10 years have passed since the crackdown on Chinese human rights lawyers in 2015. I visited China frequently around that time. My husband was stationed in China as a journalist for a Japanese news agency. During the long holidays, I stayed there for several weeks with our small child. I often met human rights lawyers and their families, ate meals with them, and listened to their stories. What I find very painful about the lawyers I'm acquainted with, such as Jiang Dianyong, Li Heping, Wang Yu, Wang Xuanzang, Tan Jitian, and Yu Wensheng, is that their families are also under severe pressure. As a scholar, I have been paying attention to the development of Chinese civil society for about 10 years, from around the early 2000s. Various social innovations have been attempted in China by academics, lawyers, journalists, and citizens. In the midst of this, I saw hopes and sufferings of Chinese human rights lawyers and their families. As I'm only a university professor, there were limited things that I could do for them. While I was thinking about what I could do, lawyer Li Fanping, who is here with me at this conference, recommended that a young man study abroad in Japan. As he was struggling to pay for his living expenses and tuition fees in Japan, I decided to host him in my home. This young Chinese man had been self-studying Japanese in China, and Li Fanping told him that Chinese people could be of some help in Japan, where people were suffering from the Great East Japan earthquake. Other lawyers also told me that Japan and China are neighboring countries and have more similar cultural and social environments than Western countries. So we learn from each other about laws and systems, and that we should create more opportunities for such mutual learning. In response to these opinions from Chinese lawyers, I gradually deepened my exchanges with Chinese lawyers and legal scholars, conducted training programs in Japan and hosted Chinese international students in my home. The first Chinese young man whom I hosted in my home is now the father of 2 children and is working hard at the Japanese company. The other young people whom I hosted in my home have also graduated from universities and graduate schools and are on their own paths. With the arrest, imprisonment, and interrogation of a large number of lawyers and their families and the strengthening of surveillance, the voices of human rights lawyers have become silent. However, just the fact their voices are not heard does not mean that they are not being worked on. I'm in frequent contact with young Chinese activists and lawyers and continue to work to raise civic consciousness and protect human rights. These young people have no choice but to go underground. In some cases, even their families provide information about their children to the authorities, which is heartbreaking for the young people. We cannot invite these young people to the 709 event tonight. We cannot invite lawyers who go to help young people when they are arrested. They are very careful and act cautiously. When the police start investigating their surroundings and themselves, they may temporarily flee overseas. Some people are unable to go overseas. Attorney Tan Chi-tian was unable to visit her daughter, who was hospitalized in Japan with a serious illness, and she passed away. What we can do in this environment, we must develop a strategy that responds to changes. We have recently been accepting Chinese people in Japan on a temporary basis. Some people are having problems of mental health in China due to the great pressure. We provide them with opportunities to take a break quietly in a relatively safe place away from China, write a book, or finish a documentary film, and so on. Some people travel between China and Japan or some other places in the world. The Trump administration in the United States has cut off much of the support for human rights activities in China, so it's also necessary to make up for that. A characteristic of the Chinese who have recently immigrated to Japan is that they are somewhat economically independent, therefore without relying excessively on funding for human rights activities from outside, like lawyer Li Qingxing, who is here with us today. Chinese people living in Japan are able to rent their own base of operations, invite speakers to give staff to carry out their activities. I think it's important to participate in human rights activities and collaborate with people both overseas and in China while maintaining as stable a life as possible for themselves. We should continue efforts to deepen the rule of law and democracy. Chinese lawyers play an important role in this regard. We will never forget the July 709 incident. Keep it in our memory and work towards the future. Thank you.
And thank you for all your love, care, and support for all these years and for so many Chinese like-minded people, including human rights lawyers. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is a lawyer from Taiwan, Weng Guoyan. Lawyer Weng Guoyan is a Taiwanese lawyer and the chairman of the Human Rights Committee of Taipei Bar Association. He's a long-standing supporter of his colleagues in China, creating some years ago a network of Taiwanese lawyers and academics for the very purpose of supporting human rights lawyers. The floor is yours, Weng 律师。
不好意思，请各位有听到我的声音吗？好，谢谢各位。各位好，我是台北律师公会主任委员翁国燕律师。那今天晚上这边代表台北律师公会，首先还是要表达对于中国人权律师的声援和支持。台北律师公会向来都非常的支持中国人权律师在人权领域里面的奋斗和努力。在2010年前后，大概有 将近10年的时间，台北律师公会一直都持续的和中国的维权律师有相关的交流跟互动。当时主要是透过在香港的中国维权律师关注组的协助跟联系，我们大概每一年都有邀请蛮多位的中国维权律师到台湾这边来访问。那当时主要也是由台北律师公会这边来做相关的联系。那我们当时也带了很多位的中国维权律师去参观了很多关于台湾这边人权保护相关的景点。那我们也有和中国的人权律师，当时针对很多的诉讼案件进行很多的策略上面的讨论、议题上面的讨论。我当时还记得我在2年左右的台北律师公会的人权委员会主任委员的任期里面，在那2年当中，其实我们也接待了很多的中国维权律师。当时包括说像是有带他们到台北这边的白色恐怖的纪念园区。那这个纪念园区在几十年前曾经是国民党政府在关押台湾的政治犯的地方。我们也曾经带很多的维权律师去参观像是郑南榕的纪念馆。郑南榕曾经是台湾在捍卫言论自由跟对抗威权政府一位很重要的异议人士。那后来他在面对威权政府的围捕的时候，选择自焚身亡。所以当时我们也有带很多的维权律师去参观郑南榕的纪念馆。那另外像是这个诉讼交流的部分，其实当时像是我们台湾这边，我们也邀请了很多在各个领域的人权方面的律师，跟中国的律师们分享各种人权议题的这个诉讼进行的方式、倡议的方式。那我们也从中国的人权律师那边，我们也听到了很多各式各样他们在中国的法治领域里面去争取权利，帮弱势民众去争取权利的一些案件。当时包括像我们一直听到的，像是因为上访的关系被逮捕的民众，像是要因为去营救遭到酷刑的民众的案件，又或者是关于剥夺的案件，我们其实看到在这些案件里面都有中国维权律师的这个参与的身影。只是后来很遗憾的就是因为10年前709事件的发生之后，后来我们跟中国人权律师的互动交流比较不顺利。那这当然是让我们感到非常遗憾的地方。那其实台北律师公会也是非常希望能够再次建立跟中国人权律师这边的互动跟交流。我们也要再次的呼吁世界各国跟国际的律师界要重视中国人权律师在中国这边职业上面权利遭到侵犯的情形。就是作为在野的法曹，是可以对于公共的议题、对于法治的议题表达清楚明确的立场，也可以大力的去推动法治的改革。以台湾来说，最知名的大概是2014年所发生的这个太阳花运动。其实当时的包括台北律师公会在内的很多律师对于这些遭到政府伤害的民众，很多的律师都是无偿然后公益的投身协助这些辩护的活动。又或者是在这10年以来，在台湾的宪法法庭的很多诉讼里面，其实律师公会都会主动的提出像是法庭之友之类的意见，提供给宪法法庭去参考。很多时候其实律师公会这边所提出来的意见也都有很明确的获得宪法法庭这边的采纳。所以我相信律师绝对是可以在公共领域里面，在法律的议题里面扮演非常重要的一个改革的角色。那我认为更重要的一点是在于说，台湾跟中国不但是距离非常的接近，而且两边其实有一些文化共通的地方。台湾的律师界所扮演的角色会对中国有产生很大的影响。台湾其实也是曾经从威权的时代转型到现在一个民主法治的社会。我们可以看到台湾在这半世纪以来的民主转型的过程当中，其实律师扮演了一个很重要的角色。包括在过去转型的时代、转型的过程当中， 异议分子遭到威权政府的打压跟迫害的时候，我们都已经可以有看到律师在其中去协助跟帮助的角色。那台湾在这一段民主转型的过程当中，其实也再次证明，在华人的社会里面是可以实施民主和法治的，而且在这个转型的过程当中，律师绝对是可以扮演一个引导法治改革的一个角色。那台湾在民主化到现在20年到30年的时间，其实世界各国都可以看得到，台湾的律师其实在民主转型的过程当中，在很多的领域里面都是非常重要的角色，包括像是司法改革，像是性别方面的法律议题，像是劳动的保护，像是环境保护，像是土地权利的保障。其实这边都有很多律师是无偿的公益的去推动保障民众的权利所以从这个角度来看，我相信在中国这边中国人权律师他们能不能够在律师职业的领域里面获得职业上面的保障，绝对是中国在迈向法治化的过程当中非常关键的一个地方那我在这边也是还是要再次代表台北律师公会人权委员会不但是要声援支持中国人权律师的职业的权利也是要再次呼吁以及世界各国重视中国的人权律师的职业权利的问题希望能够借此让中国的人权律师可以更客观更独立的职业他们的权利，更去保障弱势民众的权利。谢谢。
Our next speaker is also an old friend, but a very special friend. He's a veteran advocate for human rights lawyers in China, probably one of the earliest. That's what distinguishes Patrick. He was the first executive secretary and the longtime board member of China Human Rights Lawyers Concern Group in Hong Kong that pioneered outside support for Chinese human rights lawyers in the early 2000s. 中国听众们、观众们，我们为潘家伟先生的发言准备了中文翻译，请看右边的聊天框。Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you, Yasser. When I became the first staff member of the China Human Rights Lawyers Concern Group in December 2006, the first job was to deal with the organization's registration and other company matters. Most board members were barristers and solicitors and legislators, including our chair, Albert Ho, who is now in prison in Hong Kong, and our vice chair, Emily Lau. I remember that many journalists came to cover our press conference to launch the organization. Albert and other board members' mission was clear: support the Chinese human rights lawyers in whatever legal and legitimate activities. We organized a number of conferences with the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong and invited lawyers from China and Taiwan to share the experiences on human rights litigation and advocacy. We also supported a number of human rights cases, in particular human rights defenders, and cases involving freedom of expression, religious freedom, and concern about all forms of discrimination. We hope that our small support to the Chinese lawyers can help them survive and continue their legal practice. We also organize professional exchange workshops. We invited a number of Chinese lawyers to come to Hong Kong and go to Taiwan to meet with lawyers, judges, legal academics, another civil society organization. They also met with officials and legislators. They also observed court hearings and the meetings at the Legislative Council in Hong Kong. I still remember how some lawyers exclaimed when they came to Hong Kong, "I finally can breathe the air of freedom." Some of you who are here today might remember how you first met with some of these human rights lawyers. But all these have changed. The so-called national security law in Hong Kong changed everything. The concerned group simply could not continue its operations. As a board member, I was tasked with scaling down and eventually closing down the organization. After I moved to the UK in 2021, I co-founded the 29 Principles, hoping to continue the concerned group's efforts. Then I moved to Japan in 2022. Thanks to Professor Tomoko Ako and other Japanese lawyers and academics' support, we established the Asian Lawyers Network. We hope to continue the concerned group's legacy. We hope that we can continue to support fellow lawyers in China and other civil society leaders and NGO workers and vulnerable groups in China and Asia. We are very honored to have this opportunity to meet you all today. Let's keep up our efforts. Never underestimate all our small concerted efforts. We should believe that concerted efforts, no matter how small, can lead to changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Since 2018, the organizers of China Human Rights Lawyers Day award one or two distinguished human rights lawyers the China Human Rights Lawyers Award to recognize their work and the sacrifice they make. This year, I asked Zhou Fengsuo, President of Humanitarian China and the Executive Director of Human Rights in China, both American, US-based organizations, to announce this year's recipients. The floor is yours, 冯所。说中文的观众，请看直播屏幕的聊天框。
Thank you all for joining this important event online and here, deep into the night. I'm Zhou Fengsuo, President of Humanitarian China and Executive Director of Human Rights in China. I'm honored to announce this year's Human Rights Lawyer Award. The winners are Li Guobei and Lu Siwei. So the idea was brought up immediately after 709 crackdown of setting up this award. The idea is to highlight the great work and the sacrifice of the human rights lawyers. This crackdown has brought to spotlight. So first, I will present Li Guobei. Today, we are honored to present China Human Rights Lawyer Award to a brave and tenacious defender of justice, lawyer Li Guobei. Li Guobei may not often stand in the spotlight, but her name is engraved in some of China's most challenging human rights cases, since she spoke out for detained and tortured lawyers in Jian in 2014. Her fate has been closely tied to the fight for human rights in China. From that moment on, she chose to face adversity for justice and began a career of unexpected trials and triumphs in enormous pressure. In 2014, Cao County Christian case, she courageously defended persecuted Christian believers and protected their freedom of faith. During the massive crackdown of rights lawyers 10 years ago, known today as 709 Crackdown, she stepped up without fear. She provided legal aid to young legal assistant Gao Yue, supported detained lawyer Yu Wensheng's wife Xu Yan with warmth and resolve, and defended lawyer Zhang Wenpeng's right to meet clients. Even waiting outside the detention center all day to stand in solidarity with him. In recent years, Li Guobei has continued to protect those who dare to speak up. She defended women's rights activist Li Qiaochu and white paper movement documentary director Chen Pinlin, using her skill and courage to challenge procedural injustice and push for human treatment of her clients. She exposed how the detention center deprived Chen Pinlin of sleep and fresh air, and bravely called out the court's illegal destruction of lawyers' rights. Once again, Li Guobei stands at the front lines. Despite heavy pressure and threats, she revealed the humiliations and abuses her client, jailed lawyer Xie Yang, suffered through the judicial process. She sounded alarm not only for Xie Yang, but for the dignity of China's legal community and the rule of law itself. Yet, the road to defending rights is never easy. In 2014, Beijing authorities retaliated against her advocacy by refusing to renew her law license. She went on hunger strike and was able to win it back. During the 709 crackdown, she was barred from leaving the country for endangering national security. This year, the BE law firm she leads faced baseless delays in its annual inspection, but she refused to back down, speaking out publicly despite intimidation from the government. Lawyer Li Guobei represents countless female human rights lawyers who persist in fighting for a free and just China. With wisdom, fearlessness, and tenacity behind high walls and inside the hostile courtrooms, they guard the fragile light of rule of law. Her actions remind us, even in the dark times, people still choose to stand up for justice and dignity. The beam of light pierces the dark night. Let us draw strength and hope from Li Guobei's unwavering courage. May her perseverance inspire us all to protect the ideals of rights and justice in China and beyond. Lawyer Lu Siwei. Under Chinese Communist Party's rule, justice is often silenced and conscience suppressed. Yet, there are always individuals who insist on speaking out for the voicelessness. Lawyer Lu Siwei is one of them. With courage, strong legal expertise, and dignity, he has devoted himself to ensuring that rights guaranteed on paper become a reality for some people. Lu Siwei has long defended sensitive human rights cases. He has taken on cases that are considered off limits by the CCP regime, including the Hong Kong 12, the 4 Chengdu residents arrested for commemorating anniversary of Tiananmen massacre, and prominent human rights defenders such as Yu Wensheng and Qian Yongpei. He has openly challenged torture, illegal detention, and other abuses, always putting his conscience above personal safety. Despite constant surveillance and harassment, Lu Siwei never gave up. His home and personal vehicle were consistently monitored by the authorities, and he faced repeated obstacles when defending clients. In 2023, he was arrested in neighboring Laos while trying to reunite with his family, and was charged with illegally crossing the border. Even in detention, he had stayed true to his beliefs, showing remarkable courage and commitment to rule of law and civil society in China. Lu Siwei's work has earned him the respect of his peers in China and abroad, and his story has drawn international attention to the worsening human rights situation in China. Since his law license was revoked in 2021 and his imprisonment in 2023, he has come to symbolize the struggle of many ordinary citizens fighting for freedom and justice. His name now stands for a spirit of endurance in the face of intimidation and darkness. Lu Siwei is expected to be released from prison in August, but this does not mean the threats against him will end. We urge the Chinese government to immediately release him unconditionally and ensure his safe reunion with his family. We are honored to present Lu Siwei with this year's Human Rights Lawyer Award. We recognize his significant contribution to the defense of human rights, rule of law, and social conscience in China. He is an inspiration and a reminder that individual courage can keep the hope for justice alive. Thank you.
《
Thank you, 封锁。Thank you very much. We have come to the end of today's event. I would like to thank our audience in Tokyo and around the world for joining us to mark this important day. Thanks to our distinguished speakers today. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to particularly thank human rights lawyers in China who have watched this event from China. Excuse me. I want to say to them, we do this for you, and we do this because of you. Thank you for what you have done, and thank you for inspiring the rest of us. From our different stations, we all still have work ahead of us. The road may be arduous, but the hope is very much alive. Once again, thank you everyone. Thank you all. Goodbye for now. Thank you for coming. Now we are off the camera. I really appreciate, on behalf of the organizer, really appreciate that you guys come from far and near, but all staying this late. We really appreciate that. Thank you. And if you want to rewatch this documentary, you may do so in a couple of days. When I return to the United States, I will immediately publish it on YouTube. I will just ask whoever here you can get connected to and find out the link. I'll be spreading it everywhere.
现在可以下播吧？下播了吗？下播了。
可以停啊。等一下，我停啊。